Hello my friends, I'm Jessica Lilly. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, which is brand new and gets a little bit better each time I do one. Today's journey is going to be into a skin tone color chart. This is to look at and play with my favorite, the ones I always return to, pigments for skin tones, and how I work with those to make mostly any different kind of skin tone that I've encountered, and how I work with that with my glazing technique of layering over a cool underpainting, which I'll be doing two options here today, one in mineral violet and one in cobalt, with some varying types of warm glazes on top. And that's really how I get most of my skin tones. I do any number of thin layered glazes of this combo, and I build skin tones. So I'm excited to show you these color blends and how some of that works out. So let's do it. Let's work it out. So let me show you what I've got here today. I like to keep a ginormous water container, and that is so that I have clean water, and I'm not a 2-cup kind of person. Some people will do like 2 cups, but I am a gigantic bag person, gigantic bowl person. I'm also a person who very frequently loses my words. Need some paper towels, like always. So here is a clean paper towel we will keep on hand. I'm going to use one brush for this task today. This is one of my favorite brushes and one that I return to over and over again. This is the Silver White number 10 Bright. I use it to lift a lot when I'm doing, like when I'm sculpting and portraits and any other kind of painting, especially my realism paintings. But today we're going to use it to make lines because it's just the right size for that. I have my colors that I'm going to be using today. I've got Daniel Smith's Pyrrole Scarlet, Winsor Newton's Permanent Rose, Holbein's Mineral Violet, my all-time favorite color, Winsor Newton's Yellow Ochre, Holbein's Burnt Sienna, and Schmincke's Cobalt Blue Hue. Now, you obviously don't need the exact same colors as me, but these are the ones that I prefer to work with to make a variety of portraits. It's also worth noting that when I paint portraits, I paint them in like realistic skin tones. I do have some color variation in like some blues and some things like that, and greens end up happening naturally from the mixes. But that's what this palette is for. It's for like a realistic skin tone set. So I've got my palette, and I have taped my paper. This is just a piece of 140-pound cold press paper. You can use whatever you're going to do your portrait on. It's a great way to practice and to get familiar with your portrait paper that you're going to use for your portrait. And I've gone ahead and gridded out my chart spaces where I'm going to do my colors. This column here is going to be empty. This is just going to be labels, but I have 12 different blends that we're going to do in these different squares, and I'll show you how I'll do it, but we're going to glaze over some cool tones. They're going to be different kind of skin blends over cool glazes. So I've made previously another study of this, and so this is kind of going to give you a game plan of where we're headed. This is one that's only got mineral violet underneath. In my local class, we're specifically doing a portrait with a mineral violet underpainting, but I'm going to do this chart with a cobalt blue and a mineral violet so that in the future, or just maybe so that you as the viewer can see what those different options might be, because I do sometimes use, well, really any number of cool undertones. Sometimes I'll make a neutral gray out of the cobalt blue and the burnt sienna. Sometimes I will use just plain cobalt blue. Sometimes I'll use plain mineral violet for my underpainting, and any mixture of in between of cools. But this will give you kind of a base setup of that approach. So what I want to do is I want to start by labeling each of these grids so I know what is going to go inside of each of them. And the cools are not going to get labeled. The cobalt blue and the mineral violet, that's what I'm referring to as my cools in this context. They're not going to get labeled because they're going to be in every grid. What I want to do is I want to make a burnt sienna column. So I'm going to call this burnt sienna. And I'm going to do it all the way down. This is going to represent what each mix is. So these are all going to be a burnt sienna mix of some kind. These are all going to be a yellow ochre mix of some kind. Practically when I'm doing portraits, burnt sienna ends up feeling to me like a yellow. So in my mind, I often categorize it as a yellow. So in my mind, what I have here is 2 yellows and 2 reds and 2 cools, like 2 blues, 2 reds, and 2 yellows, even though there's, you know, that's kind of a creative definition of that, but that's how they function practically in my palette in this context. All right, so this next one is going to be permanent rose. And this will just give me a heads up of what colors to drop in each grid as we go through. And this last one is Pyrrole Scarlet. Also, this is, the purpose of this is really for myself, right, or for you to be able to study and examine and have a reference for these colors down the road. So, you know, if you, for example, spelled pyrrole wrong in scarlet, that's cool. Or at least I think it's cool. So I would encourage you to be, you know, let yourself be loose about this. All right, so this way we're going to label the opposite ways, but we're not going to have like a burnt sienna and a burnt sienna. So we're going to start by doing burnt sienna and yellow ochre. So this is going to say yellow ochre. So this box is going to represent burnt sienna mixed with yellow ochre. This box is going to be burnt sienna mixed with permanent rose. This box is going to be burnt sienna mixed with Pyrrole Scarlet. This box is going to be yellow ochre mixed with, we'll go here, burnt sienna. Yes, I know that's a duplicate, but that's okay. This one is going to be yellow ochre mixed with permanent rose. And this last one's going to be yellow ochre mixed with Pyrrole Scarlet. This is going to be permanent rose mixed with burnt sienna. This is permanent rose mixed with yellow ochre. This last one is permanent rose mixed with Pyrrole Scarlet. And we've got Pyrrole Scarlet. Here is going to be mixed with first burnt sienna. Pyrrole Scarlet mixed with yellow ochre. And the last one is Pyrrole Scarlet mixed with permanent rose. All right, awesome. And then after I'm done with this, you know, you can write at the top, like this is a skin tone study or skin tone swatches or however you want to label it. So the first thing that we want to do is put down our cool under painting, because that's what we would do in a real painting, right? So I'm going to start by getting out some cobalt, and I'm going to make it pretty watery. I grabbed a little bit of, you can see, remember, I didn't say this when I did it, but I did use my dropper, and I dropped some water on each of these pigments before I started labeling so that they would wake up. I grabbed a little bit of cobalt blue, and then I really kind of watered it down. This is a pretty transparent, light version. I can even go even lighter. When I really do my portrait, I'm not actually using very dense blues. And so I want to represent this similarly with a pretty light and transparent blue. And so I'm just going to bring a line straight down in each column to represent what this blue in an underpainting would look like on this particular paper. And this is also showing me now, what does this paper feel like with my brush? How does my paper hold the pigment? How does the pigment ride into the sizing, into the texture on my paper, if there is or if there isn't any? What's the give like on my paper? What's the tension against my brush feel like? So this is also a good way to introduce yourself to a new paper if you're starting a new paper or you're doing a portrait for the first time. Okay, so we've got one little line. Feel free to pause. I'm going to keep going, but the benefit of video is that you can pause. So I'm going to do the same thing for Mineral Violet here. And I've got this nice brush that makes this pretty easy to make these neat lines. Without having to like go back and like form it right. So if you have some kind of a round brush, you might find that you actually need to go back and form that more cautiously. But I'm going to move this so that it's a little easier for me to do the next one. And I'm coming in with my next cool color. I don't actually want to hit the neighbor. I don't want the two to bleed together. I want them to maintain their independence. But I do want them to be kind of close together because I want to preserve a lot of space for my straight colors so I can see. I also want my paint density to be, you know, roughly similar to the paint density of the blue, although it's coming out a lot lighter, but I don't want them to be too dissimilar from each other, so I can get a feel for what those portrait colors are going to look like. I don't want them to be dark because I wouldn't use dark in most of my skin tones gradations. I could in like some rich shadow areas, but I wouldn't do something that high contrast in an underpainting. Okay, cool. So let's let this dry. And while this dries, let's mix up some of our blends. Since I am totally done with the blue and the purple, I'm probably going to go ahead and clean that off of my octopus. I love my octopus. If you want to know more about it, which is probably my most common question, I'll put that down below, or you can ask me about it. I do love to talk shop, so I would love to say hi in the comments. Do you want to tell me what your favorite skin tone colors are? Or if you have a fun palette that's shaped like an octopus or anything similar. Alright, so those are cleaned out of there, and I'm going to start doing some mixes. So I need to make 3 puddles mixed with yellow ochre, right? So yellow ochre 1, yellow ochre 2, yellow ochre 3. Alright. Next, I need to do, clean that off since there's a little bit of yellow ochre on there. And next I need to do 3 of burnt sienna. Burnt sienna 1, burnt sienna 2, and a little more water in here. Burnt sienna 2, and the next one, burnt sienna 3. Alright. And let's see how far we can get here. Alright, we're going to need Pyrrole Scarlet 1. This is a pretty strong color. Pyrrole Scarlet 2. Pyrrole Scarlet 3. And the last one's going to be Permanent Rose, and I'm not going to get there on this guy. Oh, be 1, 2, 3. Let's try it. 1 in the brains, 2, and 3. check and see if you guys can see all these color mixes, because this is an important part of this video. Luckily the answer was yes, but I scooted it in a little bit better so you really could see it more clearly. I learned how to make YouTube videos a little bit better each time I got a microphone. Hopefully that's helping it sound better. I think in the last video I really stuck my old lady hair in the video a lot, so hopefully I'm not going to do that today. And remembering to make sure that we're centered, so you live, you learn. Okay, so let's match each of these colors together. So I've got yellow ochre 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to take my burnt sienna, and I'm going to put burnt sienna in 3 of them. 1. And the whole time while I'm doing this, this is drying, right? So I'm using my time in a way that is also wise. I want these to be like, roughly 50-50 mixes. Let's just do this top section. Get that out of the way. All right, so I did 3. So now I have 3 burnt sienna. I'm not going to mix these together yet, okay? Because I don't want to mix up what they are. I want to know what they are in a minute, so I don't forget what they are. But now let's grab our dab of permanent rose. We're going to go 1, I'm going to go 2, and now we're going to go into our burnt sienna over here. Burnt sienna and alizarin crimson is probably like a traditional portrait blend, more traditional than permanent rose and burnt sienna would be. But this is what I use for that same kind of relationship, the cool red and the burnt sienna. All right, now let's add some pyrrole to everything. This is more strong, so we don't have to be as tough with this. 1, 2, and the last one is permanent rose. Let's put it in here because it's pretty strong. All right, and the last mix that we're going to do is our yellow ochre. We're going to go 1, 2, and 3. Now, one of the benefits of having duplicates of this, like this, is that you will end up with some variation in like ratio of paints. And so you can do one that's more twisted towards ochre, one that's more towards the pyrrole scarlet, and have that as an additional comparison as well. We've got a pretty pyrrole scarlet-y blend over here, but so over here, let's do this like at a full opacity. Let's start with this one first, right? I've got pyrrole scarlet and yellow ochre. So this is all dry now, so we can go ahead and get started. So we've got one here, and we should have 2 of everything. So pyrrole scarlet and yellow ochre. So I'm going to do 3 opacities of this, and I'm going to layer 1 stroke right over the top of my cools, so I can see at full opacity what does this look like. Now I want this really watered down, like maybe 50% of what this was. So I'm adding like 4 drops of water. I've really watered that down a lot. Okay. We're going to go opacity number 2. And a lot of times in skin tones, when we're painting in skin tones, we really are painting very light. So this last one, I'm not even mixing the water in everywhere. I just mix it in that last little corner of it. And I got a really light version of it. So now I have 3 different opacities of yellow ochre plus pyrrole scarlet in this mix, and I can see, and I'm going to be able to see what would this type of a skin tone blend look like over these colors. And ultimately down the road, when I do my portrait, I'm not going to pick one of these swatches to do for my portrait. I'm going to do, you know, one blend in the cheek area, and then I'm going to layer another part over the nose and another part in the eyes. And I'm going to ultimately use all of these blends in my face anyway. But when I want to like warm up a cheek, or when I want to pull the right color for a lip, this will help give me some guidance for how to do that. Let's try our other Pyrrole Scarlet and Yellow Ochre. I just know which ones these are from being familiar with these colors. So if you feel less familiar with them, you can slow your roll and do these one at a time. You don't have to do them all together at once like I've done. So this is going to be a much thinner and also a pinker blend of those same colors. So that's interesting to see another kind of variation and another set of variations that we can get from this same blend. Let's thin that down more. Ultimately, when I am actually glazing on a portrait, most of the time I'm glazing at layer 3. I'm only going back and adding on this kind of darker opacity for details and just some small areas at the end. I'm building up the rest of it in small places. Look at that beautiful pale color. So, you know, those are the same two blends, but this is a pinker version and this is a yellower version of the same colors. And isn't that so pretty? So that's great to know. Let's try the next thing. Let's try, right here we've got Permanent Rose and Yellow Ochre. So let's see where we're at with this. You know, this isn't really so much science as much as just playing with our colors and seeing what can we get, and what's a good path forward for whatever our objective is. This is closer to this other light one, and I know this is going to be another light one. Alright, so I'm coming in with 2 whole brushfuls of water, and you see I'm not actually dabbing my brush that clean in between. I'm really applying this pretty wet. I'm not doing a dry mix. I don't want to scratch up or obstruct these underpainting colors at all. I want to glaze it right on top, and so to do that I don't want to like go back and forth over it. I'm just doing my single brush stroke on top and letting it go. And one of the ways I'm able to do that is by having a paint that is fluid enough that it will move easily over that space. If my paint were too thick and too dense and didn't have enough water in it, I wouldn't be able to spread it over, I wouldn't be able to glaze it over these cool tops without disrupting them, and I don't want to disrupt them. All right, Permanent Rose and Yellow Ochre. Ooh, this is going to be a pinker one. Pretty pink. It's pretty. I don't need as much water this time because this is already pretty thin. I'm coming for a real pale one. That's a pretty way to look at all these different, so many different shades, variations, and mixes we can get just from this small set of colors, right? And so we want to examine like just the plain color, like in the highlights of the face, we would, you know, just be, and this one's actually dry, so you can see how pretty this dried. We would be using just the plain color, but also as we layer and glaze, it's going to be with a cool undertone, with a cool undertone underneath it, with the base underneath, and so that's kind of what we're examining as well, and that's kind of what we're exploring too. So let's do this one on top of the octopus head next. This is Burnt Sienna and Permanent Rose. I'm going to start with my most paint dense blend. Let's see, Burnt Sienna and Permanent Rose. It's like filling in a puzzle. And you can see as we get into this Burnt Sienna blends, the Burnt Sienna plus the Mineral Violet blends, those will make some really beautiful colors for darker skin tones. And so I work in that family a lot for those kind of skin tones. Okay, so Burnt Sienna and Permanent Rose again is over here, and this is going to be, at the very least, a much more dense blend. Let's compare our color to the other color we had. It's very similar, so let's actually pull some more. I want to have two different representations of this blend that feel different from each other. And I want this one to lean more burnt sienna and also be darker. So I'm going to do that with intentionality. Okay, so I'm going to burnt sienna and permanent rose. I've got a dark version here. So we can see this is a blend that I'll use for darker values and darker shadows sometimes is why I want to do that and why I want to show you that. So we have a lighter, like lippier color. Isn't that a pretty color for a lip? Depending on the lip and what the light's like. And then here's some more rich, deep shadows, deep value here. And then we'll do a light blend of it as well. Beautiful. Okay, so let's look at what we've got next. Let's do burnt sienna and yellow ochre. You can see burnt sienna plus yellow ochre. It really is a very yellow blend. Like I said, for all practical purposes, let's make this intentionally one of these more yellow and one of these more burnt sienna-y. This will be our more yellowy one, and the next one will be more burnt sienna-y. So I made a richer blend so we can have more of a dense sample here. Oops. Okay, so I've got burnt sienna and yellow ochre. And go as slow as you need to not get mixed up in the puzzle of it. Part of the joy for me of swatching and of painting, I am a swatch lover, great lover of swatches. Part of the joy for me of swatching is the slowdown of it all. Yeah, I'm not in a rush, I'm not in a hurry. I'm just going to sit here and do something that could be considered wasteful and is fully creative, fully embodying my heart's desire to paint and just serve that space. Okay, so this is a little bit more blended now towards burnt sienna plus yellow ochre. And that's right next to us, yellow ochre, burnt sienna. So here's the browner version of the same blend. Trying to avoid those labels as long as I remember to. Alrighty, cool. Alright, so we've got two differing, more yellowy options to bring in to places on the face where we're going to have more yellows. And we can see where some of these greens will come into play this way now too. We've got some glazes over our blues and over our mineral violets that'll bring us there as well. Mineral violet's probably a little bit of an easier color to do for a portrait underpainting. Because you're not going to accidentally go too cool, really. It's really like a really beautiful shadow color on skin tones. So I teach my beginner class with mineral violet as the underpainting, and I also do some myself that way. But I also often do like a mix of them. And you could see how it would be a little harder to control the blue because it's a more... Because it's bluer, because it's more blue color. All right, so we've got burnt sienna and pyrrole scarlet next. Pyrrole scarlet is this cherry red. See what we've got here. This is a pretty burnt sienna-y mix, and it's not that dark, which I think is probably good. This pyrrole scarlet is like a bright accessory color. It's kind of intense in my opinion. Also, it's a little bit less transparent. It's kind of intense in my opinion for like base skin tone mass areas, so it makes sense for me to do this mostly thinner. And by thinner, I mean with more water, more transparent. All right, cool. And then the last one here, burnt sienna, pyrrole scarlet. And let's do one over here that's more red. See if we did it anyway on our own, and we did. All right, cool. That one is over here, leans more towards that cherry red. You can see there's a lot of similarities in some of these mixes. I'm somebody who tends to enjoy the nuance and the difference between them, and that's one of the reasons I like swatching and swatch charts, is I like to look at and think about and enjoy the subtle nuances between the different kind of colors and how they respond. Okay, beautiful blend. Awesome. Our last mix is going to be Pyrrole Scarlet and Permanent Rose. Now this is a red. This is just red. So we'll do a pinkier red and we'll do a orangier red. Obviously, this is not a color that we're using in a mass area of a skin tone either. This is, you know, for a small highlight area on a lip. There's reds I find a lot of times in the shadows under the nose or deep inside the ears, inside of the pockets of the eyes. Sometimes there's bright reds. So there are places where we will use these types of reds, but this one is the pink. That was the pinkier one, and this one's going to be the orangier one. So let's get a little bit of an extra dab of that Pyrrole Scarlet in here, so we really can tell that's what's going on. Yeah. All right, now do a really thin, watery one for very light pink. It's good to know about when we can have these very light pinks, because we can use very light pinks like this for adding a flush to our cheek or a flush to a lip or whatever. All right, so there you have it. I'm going to let it dry, and then I will keep it in my folder where I keep all of my reference materials and all my reference things. And when I do my portraits, I like to keep this out and by my side, and this will help me mix my paints as I go and pick colors that match my objective the most. So if I'm painting to match a photograph, I can hold my photograph side by side with these colors and decide which color fits that area of the photograph the best. And again, like I said, I usually do that in, you know, 4 or 5 layers of thin glazing. So underpainting, and then layers some of these glazes on top. So those videos are going to come next, but for my online people, those are going to be paid content. So contact me if you want the step-by-step lesson for how to do that style portrait. I'm going to set up an online class that way, and we'll work on it together, but we'll use pre-recorded videos, so you can do your own photograph, and I'm going to help everybody work through using your own photograph to do my very systematic method of portrait painting. So I'd love to have you join us if you want to. I thought you might enjoy seeing some of these swatches up close, so I thought I would bring this in close to the camera and give you each swatch up close. So here's Burnt Sienna and Yellow Ochre 1, Burnt Sienna and Yellow Ochre 2. These are mostly dried by now, so you can see kind of what that looks like. Burnt Sienna and Permanent Rose, and Burnt Sienna and Pyrrole Scarlet. Burnt Sienna and Permanent Rose, the other blend, the browner blend. Yellow Ochre and Permanent Rose, such a pretty color for really pale skin. Permanent Rose and Yellow Ochre, Pyrrole Scarlet and Yellow Ochre, Burnt Sienna and Pyrrole Scarlet, Yellow Ochre and Pyrrole Scarlet, Permanent Rose and Pyrrole Scarlet, and Permanent Rose and Pyrrole Scarlet, the redder blend. Cool, huh? All right, see you next time.